Hi, welcome back. And this is the first of 3 video sessions that we're going to be covering on the China supplier model. So we're at this area here in your PowerPoint slide. So let's just click on this PowerPoint slide and move to the next slide. And we're really focusing on the supplier model. And I think the whole theme of this is if we can better understand the suppliers, their strategic, their pressures they're under, the choices they make, then you're going to be in a better position to, number one, select the right supplier. Then after you've selected the right supplier, hopefully, then you're in a better position to work with that supplier for a long-term win-win relationship. So these are the 2 big decisions that you'll be making. And probably the first decision, supplier selection, has much more implications for how successfully you develop a relationship with the supplier. So hopefully after going through these 3 videos, you have a better feeling or confidence to make the right supplier selection decision. In other videos in our program, you will learn more about the step-by-step detail in the selection process. So it will take you through the mechanical steps to take. But here, it's all about really understanding the mind of the China supplier. So when you actually see it in practice, you're going to see, oh, okay, I understand what's going on now. You have a better understanding by seeing some signals and cues, which we're going to talk about in these videos. What we're going to take you through in this section, again, is how to broaden your perspective of strategic engagement and how are China suppliers different from Western developed country suppliers. And this is very important because often buyers feel that they've been sourcing for years for many other countries. When you go to China and it's the same old practices again. Well, China suppliers are different. And so we want to know in what ways are they different? How do they contrast with Western developed suppliers? In videos 2 and 3, we're going to cover more about how can we know more about Chinese suppliers so we can make better selection and management decisions. And so combination of this video and videos 2 and 3, you have a better feeling, better confidence to actually go out and select the right supplier. And after the right supplier has been selected, you'll have a strategy in place for how best you can work with that supplier, depending on your strategy and with knowledge of the strategy of your Chinese supplier. So let's go through to how to broaden your perspective of strategic engagement. But before that, let's have a look at this example. This example is real, and my friend in Shanghai, a major manufacturer, foreign automobile manufacturer, they went out and purchased this Cherry QQ. It's about one third cheaper than the foreign equivalent, the Chevrolet Spark. They brought it back to the factory and pulled it apart and actually found that the part stamp on the axle of the QQ was exactly the same as the one part axle stamped on the Chevrolet Spark. So what does that tell you? Well, when GM went and got their supplier, the supplier would have done, say, 100,000 units axles for GM and any number of months. But without telling GM, that supplier has actually gone and made 20,000 more without telling GM and then supplied to the manufacturer of the Cherry QQ. And Cherry QQ can go to that supplier and say, look, can you do us 20,000 of the exact same axle and we'll pay you marginal costs, maybe plus 5% more, a little bit of margin for both. So these things are real. These things do happen on a day-to-day basis in China. So we don't want this to happen to you, and we've got some good oil on how you can prevent these things to happen. Okay, so first of all, we want to broaden your perspective of strategic engagement because traditionally there's a focus on cost. And with this focus on cost, we think as a buyer that it's a win-win relationship. If the supplier agrees to the price, that very, very low price that you have pushed them on, you find that, well, they win, we win, it's a win-win relationship because we've got a contract. Well, really, that's a win-lose relationship for the long term. And what the supplier hears is, well, we make less money, so my customer can have some cost savings, even though the buyer thinks it's a win-win situation. So this focus on the dollar is really not good for a long-term sustainable relationship. And it really doesn't get the supplier to focus on the non-cost factors of the delivery. And I think, as a buyer, you're looking for performance, not just on cost terms, but on a whole range of terms. Technology, delivery, service, quality. There are a lot of dimensions going on here. So we just can't focus on the dollar in the negotiations. So there's 2 areas of improvement here. By focusing on the link between the buyer and the supplier, you're not taking costs out of the chain. And ultimately, you want to take costs out of the supply chain for a win-win relationship to occur. Okay? You must push costs up the supply chain. You must go further. You must go further than do that. You need to find a way of working with the supplier where you can help the supplier manage the reduction in costs or the reduction in price that you're prepared to pay. So a win-win relationship occurs when you not only get a better price for yourself, but you actually help the supplier get a higher margin by managing their operations more efficiently. And so then the supplier wins too. So we need to change from the perspective of reducing price to reducing supply chain costs. And that requires a broader perspective where you're working with the supplier to help them give you something at a cheaper price, but at the same time the supplier is able to give it to you for less costs of goods manufactured. And so is there some ways, list all the ways that you could work with the supplier to help them make the product for you cheaper, and cheaper in a way that doesn't diminish the quality or the delivery or the time it takes to give it to you. So that's the challenge, how to drive costs down and at the same time take costs out of the supply chain, how to drive cost savings and benefits. You need to change from the perspective of reducing price to reducing the supply chain costs. So we need to focus on the value created between you and the supplier. Now here, this is not just working with the Chinese supplier, this is working with all suppliers around the world. But this has increased emphasis when you're actually working with Chinese suppliers, as you'll see in the following slides. But right now, you need to broaden the perspective of strategic engagement. For the supplier, how can you help them improve in the areas of technology, quality, service, delivery, not just costs? Get the supplier excited about following you on these improvements, and then the supplier will feel it is really a win-win relationship. For you, the buyer, understand how your design process and promises to the customer affects the demands on your supplier. Are your designs more complicated than needed? Are your designs suited to a Chinese factory? And what we mean by the actual tolerances that are able to be met by the machines in the Chinese factory. It's possible that you can make designs that can only be met by the tolerances of machines in Germany or in Japan and not in a Chinese factory. So are your designs suited to the tolerances of a Chinese factory? Okay, and what are the critical parts of design that matter to the performance of the product? So let's move on to Chinese supplier behavior differences. Okay, let's have a look. There are 5 points of differences that we can tease out here. For a developed country supplier, it's likely they're going to have a strategy like yourself, have a long-term view. They're in the business of providing value. They have that customer value mindset. So they have that value-added awareness. They can have the supplier tell you how to improve things. So you can get feedback from your developed country suppliers to say, how can we do better? And the supplier will gladly tell you. They have a quality control awareness and a customer service awareness. They have an information systems awareness. And when you talk to them about putting in an ERP system or integrated ordering system, they know what you're talking about. They probably already have a system in place already because they're anxious about providing more added value to their customers. And if they have relationships with third parties, they are transparent above the board and they're likely to be clear. And it's likely you will know about these relationships. So let's turn to page 2, the Chinese supplier. The Chinese supplier is a short-term view. They're thinking about the next 12 months, if not less. They're thinking about how much money we can make from the next business opportunity. How much money do we need to just keep operating for the next 6 months? They're not thinking about the next 2 or 3 years. They're not thinking about, for a majority of them, about becoming world-class. They're just looking to trying to survive for the next 12 months. They have a cost and price awareness. Traditionally, that is how they have competed. They have competed by providing the lowest cost. They have won contracts because they have provided the lowest cost quotation. So they know how to drive down costs. Now, not drive down costs from a total quality management perspective, but driving down costs by outsourcing, getting cheaper materials, doing deals with other factories they have good relationships with without telling you, the buyer. Okay, and quality is good enough. As long as they ship it out to the container and get that container shipped off, if it's 90% okay, then they're happy. Less use of information systems. They'll have multiple accounting systems to suit different needs. Accounting system for provincial government, accounting system for the taxation, accounting system maybe for you if you require it as part of the sharing of cost information. So less use of integrated information systems here. They know how to use information systems for a single objective that they have to try and meet, but not necessarily an integrated information system that actually solves all of their problems, because different problems require different information. An integrated system will actually provide too much transparency for any one party they are reporting to. So keep that in mind. It's all about not having too much transparency, so you need multiple information systems to actually control the information going to the different parties. And they have close relationships with third parties. And that's not a bad thing if they tell you, but often they don't tell you. So you just keep that in mind. These are the tricky things that Chinese suppliers, how they are different from developed country suppliers. So the China supplier is different in several ways, and these 5 items, this is a starting point you need to be clear on. So given these 5 items, here is what you should do. If you don't learn anything else in this course, at least take the following actions, make note of these following actions. Number 1, you need to be careful of the represented capability of the supplier. Share with them the long-term view of working with you, okay? So move away from negotiating for just the next product, for the next product delivery, and focusing on that price of that delivery. Try to expand your negotiations beyond the next delivery to the next year, the next 12 months, 2 years. And so you create a long-term view for them. Of course, you need to deliver in the next transaction. That is, they'll deliver to you. Hopefully they do a good job. Then you pay them on time. And then the next time you negotiate, then you can go and talk more about long-term things, okay? And that's when you can have that long alcohol-fueled business dinner with the supplier. You may not want to do it on the first meeting, but after you've done one round of business, then you can get into that and then start the relationship on other levels. Second action point, teach them how to improve their margins. Again, this is probably after the first time that you've actually dealt with them, through production improvements, product enhancements. Don't expect that they can give you suggestions for improvement. So if you're working with a Western supplier and you ask them, how can we improve? How can we do things better? They'll gladly tell you, especially if they know that they're looking for a long-term relationship, which most of them are. A Chinese supplier would not naturally tell you, even if they can. They may not be able to tell you at all. So you would not be able to tell the difference between a supplier that has the capability to show you improvements and a supplier that doesn't have the capability, because each will probably not tell you. They would probably see that as free consulting. And in Chinese, it's not normal to give away free consulting. That is making suggestions for improvement. So let's have a look at the next thing that you can do. Make very clear what is acceptable quality at the start of the relationship. Okay, you've got to make this very clear. This is black and white. This will go into the contract, it'll go into the memorandum of understanding. That will be explained in other parts of this program. But right now, just keep that in mind. Make very, very clear what is acceptable quality. And assume, number 4, assume that they are not going to reveal the truth. You need to seek alternative ways of leveraging information. You may not be able to count on their accounting system. You may need to go and physically count material shipments to the supplier to get a sense of, are they getting high quality raw materials? Okay, so if a supplier on their books have shown that they ordered maybe 1,000 kilograms of lead in the last 6 months from one manufacturer, you can see that they're in the business of getting the best quality solder, and they're not going to go out and get 100 kilograms of solder just for your project. And so there are non-accounting ways of trying to work out what are the costs the supplier is incurring to give you good quality. More about that when we talk about that in the section on factory surveillance and advanced negotiation tactics. But keep in mind, assume they're not going to reveal the truth, and you need to seek alternative ways of leveraging information. Assume that close relationships will exist, and to explain to the supplier it's okay to outsource as long as you can visit the outsourced party and audit and check the quality. And so this is something you need to reveal up front. And if you don't make this clear, they'll probably do that without telling you anyway. And so the reason why Chinese suppliers are reluctant to tell you anything that is not stipulated in the agreement, they will think that you will not do business with them again. They're afraid of losing your second order, your third order, of having you as a long-term customer. They are afraid. They don't know how to capture you as a long-term customer, but at the same time, they don't want to lose you as a potential long-term customer, okay? So they're not going to be proactive, go out of their way to take strategic steps to keep you as a long-term customer, but they will avoid sharing information with you that works against what they think will work against you being their long-term customer. And one of those ways of avoiding is by not sharing with you the fact that they're outsourcing, the fact that they're getting this type of materials. And I guess from a foreigner perspective, sometimes we prefer suppliers just to come clean and just tell us, okay, we can work with that. It's better to know now rather than know later when it's too late. And this is one area where you can come clean with them and say, look, we are not going to discontinue ordering from you if you are sourcing from a third-party supplier. Just tell us that third party. Just tell us, and because we want to audit from them, we want to make sure we have the good quality, and we want to make sure that we don't have problems downstream in the production process or further downstream with warranty claims. So just make it very clear from the start that we're not going to cut the order if you make these decisions to outsource, but just tell us if you feel pressured you have to, and we'll get the auditor to look at the outsourced party. So it's a matter of trying to bring things that are very opaque and very not transparent to the table, and so things are much more black and white in the negotiations. More about that in negotiation strategy. But right now, at this very early juncture of understanding Chinese supplier behavior, here are 5 action points that you can start to think about when you're looking to select Chinese suppliers. Next, here we have the different strategies for engaging with international customers. In my experience, in talking to over 1,000 Chinese suppliers, in talking to dozens and dozens of large multinationals who are dealing with the suppliers, including Apple, including HTC, Motorola, Toshiba, Philips, and a host of other big multinationals, I've come to the conclusion that there are basically 4 types of suppliers who are engaging with international customers. And here they are. The first type is the supplier that wants to engage because they know they'll get paid. Like Apple may not pay until 3 months later, but the suppliers know they're going to get 100% money for any delivery made. Whereas when they're working with a domestic customer, they're not sure whether they're going to get paid. They're not sure. Having said that, I've actually spoken to a supplier where they were dealt by a Swedish buyer, because that Swedish buyer went bankrupt, and the Chinese supplier asked them, what was your number one challenge? They said, well, we didn't get paid. We thought we were going to get paid by this international customer, and they went bankrupt, and we lost everything, and we shipped. It was too late, and we lost over 100,000 plus yuan on the business. And so it does happen to China suppliers that they don't get paid by their large customer. It's not just that you as an international buyer get diddled by a Chinese supplier giving you poor quality. Sometimes it goes the other way. Okay, the next type is a learner, okay? And that is a Chinese supplier that wants to learn. They're looking for ideas to copy and sell domestically. In other words, they want to engage with you because they can learn the latest designs. And they're happy to work with you and not make much margin. And they're going to take those designs and they're going to put those designs into some product they're manufacturing without telling you, and then they'll just focus their manufacturing on that product and then ship and sell it domestically. You'll still get your order, but you will not be told about this other order that they're doing for domestic sales, and they might go direct for that. The third type of supplier that we've come across is a legitimizer, and this is a very common supplier that wants to work with a big brand name multinational. For example, suppliers that try to become approved supplier with Apple, HTC, Samsung, Sony, all the big multinational names. And these type of suppliers, they want to become approved supplier. Number one, their second step is, oh, we are now approved, so now we're going to seek out more customers, either domestically or international, and then they're going to make money from these other customers. Then they want to save it up as a record of profits they've made over 1, 2, or 3 years, list on the stock exchange, either locally or overseas, then make money from the IPO and then put into property. And that is a pure strategy that is very clearly articulated by a number of suppliers I've spoken to. And watch out for that type of supplier, because they're not totally interested in making the best product in the world. They're interested in using an association with you, if you have a big brand name, to make money off other customers. So this is more like a marketing strategy. Now, here's the fourth type of supplier that we have seen in our travels, and that is a world-class supplier. This is probably the 5% of suppliers, by the way, and this is probably what you're looking for in your selection process. And this is your BYDs of the world. And as I explained in video 2 and 3, BYD was a supplier of batteries, and they tried 3 times back in the early 2000s, this is over a decade ago, to become the approved supplier for Motorola. Motorola said no to them on the first time, no to them on the second time, but on the third time they got their ISO correct, they got their total quality processes in place. You know, Motorola is very big on this, Six Sigma. They got their Six Sigma quality control process in place, and Motorola approved them on the third time. And the rest is history. BYD today is now one of the largest motor vehicle manufacturers in China, and they are leading the charge in China of making electric vehicles. So this is a mentality of a supplier that wants to become world class. Yes, they want to learn from you as a multinational, but not just to take it and sell domestically. They want to move their standards, their quality standards, to world class, and they want to dominate markets around the world. And so BYD is looking to export, and they're in the early stages of doing that now. So there you have it. There are 4 types of suppliers in terms of strategy, and it's probably, you need to look out for these types and the different strategies. And of course, there's a mixture of these strategies in every type of supplier, depending on what opportunity comes to their doorstep. So there you have it. In this module, at this part, this first part of 3 on the China supplier business model, we really looked at strategic engagement, and it's more about, number 1, we want to broaden the perspective of strategic engagement. Number 2, we wanted to understand how Chinese suppliers are different from their Western developed country suppliers. And number 3, we briefly shared with you the 4 different strategic types of Chinese suppliers. In video 2 and 3 that follows, we go into more depth on the pressures facing Chinese suppliers. Now, I must warn you that some of the material in videos 2 and 3 are a little academic, but we really want you to have a really good grounding of where does this Chinese supplier behavior come from. But having said that, the videos 2 and 3 do have some useful takeaways that you can put into action along with the worksheets that are provided. So it will help you in the selection process and help you in the supplier management process. Here's the framework for video 2, which will launch you into when you go into video 2. We're going to explain this framework, and having a better understanding of this framework, you have a better idea of where the Chinese suppliers are feeling the pressure, where they are coming from, and that can help your conversation with them in negotiations. Video 3, we're going to go into more detail about what are the real challenges faced by Chinese suppliers, and if you can understand their responses to these challenges, then you're able to classify them into one type or another type of supplier that suits or does not suit the business that you want to do with them. So there you have it. There's the first section of the supplier model, and catch you in video 2 and video 3.